to our computer, and welcome and thank you everyone for joining us at the Glunz Tasting Hall. Today we have a great panel discussion by three fabulous individuals. We are getting it started by one of only, I believe it's 3 people in the world that have 3 or 4 that have both Master of Wine and Master Sommelier. Just spectacular. Mr. Doug Frost is coming to us from the Arctic center of the US. And then we have also covered in Arctic snow or ice is Jesse Lange, coming from the winter wonderlands of the Willamette. Jesse is at home because he can't get to the winery because of not global warming, but global freezing and a bunch of ice storms that they've been getting. And then Pfluger, Alex Pfluger is here from the Pfalz, just outside of Worms. And Alex is a rock star. He's bio fanatic. He is Mr. Biodynamite himself, and he is joining us. And it is ice cold there as well. Apparently, the ice wine is well picked, as I was corrected earlier. A terrible joke, but at this point, I'm going to stop talking. And Doug, kick it off to you, sir.
Great. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. I'm going to unfortunately make you look at a couple of slides, if that's okay. This will just take a second, I swear to God. But yeah, we're here to talk about, climate change obviously is a huge subject. There's no point in pretending that we're going to be exhaustive about it. Really, what we want to do is talk to Alex and talk to Jesse about how they're approaching the challenges provided by that. So as Joe already said, Alex is here, Jesse is here. Alex is somebody whose wines I respect enormously, who can help us understand biodynamic processes and how they impact his land there. Jesse as well has a great deal of experience, multi-generational, both of these winemakers. And of course, Jesse I've known for a long time because I used to get to hang out with Wendy and Dawn on a regular basis. And if we had the time, I could tell Wendy and Dawn stories forever, but let's not do that. Let's get to the crux of the biscuit. And yeah, this is not surprising anyone. There's a lot of things that we're all dealing with around the world in terms of the impact of climate change. And it's not, frankly, it's not all necessarily negative, but it requires changing how we look at things and changing how we do things. Certainly, Germany, I think it's no exaggeration to say that there have been fantastic vintages over the last 2 or 3 decades, precisely due to climate change. Nonetheless, we're all dealing with more climate events, and when we have climate events, they seem to be far more cataclysmic. And I'm not catching anybody by surprise in any of this, where anybody who's making wine on the West Coast is dealing with the effects of smoke damage right now, and trying to understand something that even in Australia, where they've been dealing with this for well over a decade, they're still trying and grappling to come to an understanding of it all. So we're not going to linger a long time on each wine, because I think it's more important to hear what Jesse and Alex have to say than it is to watch, said Master Sommelier, Master Wine. Oh, well, I'm getting hints of, I don't know, pineapple plus whatever. We don't need that. You taste the wines. You make your own damn mind up about the wines, but this is basically some information about it. And I wanted to show this wine in particular. I think Mary Hill is so fascinating. One, because I think Columbia Gorge is a fascinating place that maybe even Jesse can relate to, in so much as it impacts his weather sometimes, but also that we're getting used to making wines in places that we once thought were marginal at best, and now maybe aren't. Now, of course, Otis Vineyard really in Yakima is a vineyard that is one of the oldest, has certainly the oldest Cabernet Sauvignon vines that we'll find in Washington State. And this is in Albarino there. And I thought it was important to show this grape, in so much as you realize Albarino is now legal in Bordeaux because of climate change, because people are trying to figure out what should we be growing here and what shouldn't we be growing here in Bordeaux, for God's sakes. So, the most buttoned down, the most British of all French wine regions. So yeah, we're definitely having to make decisions as we go. And with that, I really, like I said, I promised that I'd keep the wine talk to a minimum when it comes to the individual wines, and we talk to Alex and Jesse instead. So I'll just throw it to you gentlemen to ask that question of, what immediate impacts has climate change made upon the wines that you can speak to right now? I mean, Alex, you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Doug, and hello, everybody. First of all, it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you in that meeting. And I think coming from Germany, I can definitely report a lot of things that we have experienced because of climate change. And yeah, I did a bit of research the last days to give you a few numbers, and I must say we saw big changes the last 20, 25 years. And as you said, Doug, predominantly positive for German wines. I mean, the big picture, of course, is challenging. We saw pictures. Global warming leads to flood, to droughts and heavy winds, etc. Intense weather events, and we experienced this here in Germany too. The problem is the speed of global warming that really makes it hard to adapt, and we have to adapt way faster than generations before, I think. So the speed of climate changing has increased. And just to give you an example, I have compared the temperatures from 1950 to 2000 compared to the last 20 years. And we see an increase of 15%. So the temperature is higher today. And at the same time, the water has decreased. So we see minus 18% of water compared to the other period. And what we really see is that the hours of sun have increased by 54%. So that's quite a lot. And so for us, it opened up new opportunities, I must say. And again, it's predominantly positive. I would say that in our estate, we have increased the number of red wines. We have opened our mind for new varietals, and looking back to what my father, my grandfather did, they mainly were growing Riesling, and today on our estate 40% of the production is already red wine, and it's not only Pinot Noir, it's also St. Laurent, but it's also Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and I have friends. They are growing Syrah. So it's definitely changing. And also talking about white wines, we are now planting Chenin Blanc. We have Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. So climate change for us opened up new markets. We could definitely get in touch with new customers. They were never interested in Riesling, but they always liked Chardonnay or Chenin. And now, as we're producing these wines, it's for us, it's a new market that we are entering now, and so a lot of cool things actually happening for us because of climate change. Yeah.
And Jesse, would you put a positive spin on it, or is it in the middle of an ice storm?
On the human timeline or generational timeline, I think it's a really challenging thing to articulate or even experience properly. I'm not sure we're equipped to do that. I really appreciate Alex bringing some of those numbers to the fore. I think that's really critical to better understand. But yeah, in terms of what we're doing, what you're seeing in the Willamette Valley, I think it's what global temperatures are up, what a degree and a half Celsius over the last 20 years. I think it's fairly well documented. The science is sort of put to bed, I'd like to think, although living in the States, sometimes, you feel kind of at odds with that. But I think it's fairly well put to bed. And your adaptability to it's key. I mean, definitely here when my folks moved in 1987, and certainly the vintages and some of our forebears before us, the Letts, the Sokol-Blossers, the Campbells, Erath, everybody that came before us, I think we suffered from a stigma of the Willamette Valley being cold and wet. And, that's something I always felt as a very young person, sort of, I always had a chip on my shoulder about that because, that's what my parents heard and what our forebears heard was that you couldn't grow Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley, because Oregon was too wet, just rained all the time. And let alone, David Lett had done all the climactic data assimilation and had studied this area and suggested that it rains in the Willamette Valley, but 90% of that's in the wintertime when the vines are dormant. So, seeing things change on that time frame and seeing how we've evolved as a region, I think is really impressive. But weighing in on that on a generational level is tough. It's definitely gotten a little warmer, but I don't think we're sort of changing our entire portfolio of varietals here. I mean, mainly what we're still focused on here in the Willamette Valley is Pinot Noir, of course, Chardonnay, Pinot Gris are 3 top varietals, and I don't think you'll see that change anytime soon. But there are people branching out and planting Tempranillo and Syrah, and some of that could be based on specific sites that are maybe warmer than others, and also viticultural techniques that we're able to maybe mitigate some of those issues that we might have had in the past by leaf removal, cover crops, yields, everything like that you can kind of tinker with viticulturally to put yourself in a position to be successful. So definitely change is happening, but all in all, I feel like we're in a good spot, and no reason to change like whole hog.
Sure, but Tempranillo, are you playing with Tempranillo a little bit?
From the Umpqua Valley, yes, indeed. But our friends over at Stoller have a little bit planted here in the Dundee Hills, a couple other sites too, and I know our friends down at Christum and Steve Doran, they got a block of Syrah planted there. So you do see that here and there, although the site at Stoller here, that's lower elevation Dundee Hills, so pretty exposed, being full south facing, and I think that's a proper site to be playing with. But it sort of depends on site specificity and kind of what you're doing on your given plot of land.
Okay, well, I want to direct everybody to keep going on the wines and to go ahead and check out the Franklin Tate Estate Chardonnay. Yes, I know for some people, well, this is a bigger, if you will, richer, more mouth-filling wine than you're going to run into in the Puy-Fuissé. And sometimes I take wines in a sort of, in what might appear to be a backwards order because I want those differences to show up. I want the mineral character and the pH and the acidity of the Puy-Fuissé to show. So I'm going to pour a little bit of my Franklin Tate, and y'all have some fun with that while we get to the important stuff, which is, what I do want to ask both Alex and Jesse. So what specific changes, I mean, you've talked about grape varieties, and so I guess before I'd even ask this question, what changes have you had to consider and maybe haven't pulled the trigger on yet, but you're both multi-generational, particularly, I'll start with you, Alex. To what degree are, older generations, to what degree, let me change this down. To what degree are previous generations, like your father or your parents or grandparents or people that are older, horrified by the idea that somebody is really focusing on Syrah now in the Palatinate? I mean, to what degree is that just do they feel like mistakes are being made rather than an adjustment to a new reality?
I'm lucky because my grandfather is still alive. He just turned 91, and we discuss a lot about wine. And the big difference, of course, it's today with climate change we have new opportunities. But I would say another thing. Then my grandfather never had the chance to travel, never had the chance to taste different wines from all over. So he really he stayed in his region, in his mindset for Pfalz, and so there was never for him. He never had the idea to plan something else. So I think that is something we have to consider as well. I think we are more self-reflected today. Our mindset has changed a bit. We're a bit more open. And so we really ask the question if we should stay with something that our generations have done forever and ever and ever, or should we really apply on the new options we have? So I think that's an interesting discussion that we have. For him, I mean, he introduced organic farming in the 80s here in our area when nobody thought about a vineyard being a living place. So he is used to changes. But of course, when it comes to grape varietals, he's a Riesling guy. He has been a Riesling guy his whole life. But he's open for it. And I think that's part of the DNA of this estate where here, that we always try to react, and we always try to think forward. And I mean, of course, he sees that we have with the weather now, we can plant maybe not Tempranillo, but he's really excited about our Cabernet Sauvignon and our Cabernet Franc. I mean, we taste wines together. He is still interested, and I think it's great fun for him to see that. And the main thing he's really happy about is that we're not stuck in the moment. We really adapt. We go with the options we have, and we try to make the best out of it. So I mean, he's 90, but he's still young in his mind, and he is really happy about the development of the estate.
Well, that's obviously fantastic to have as an asset. And Jesse, you get a lot of dawn around the winery, I've noticed. You know, that the whole idea of wandering off into the sunset, there's more talk than reality, at least when I visited. But, you know, we love seeing dawn. So, you know, how is that dynamic for you in talking about what changes need to happen? And what changes are you thinking about, but you're like, no way we're pulling the trigger on this until we have to?
Well, change is the only constant, right? I mean, certainly that's the case. And yeah, both my folks are around all the time. They live still on the winery property. I mean, we started our company in the basement of our house. Thankfully, it's not there anymore, but certainly they still live in the same house. So they're there every day. But I think just as Alex can speak to this too, but as a wine grower and winemaker, that sense of wonder, that sense of tinkering is something that's sort of ingrained upon you when you're exploring different varietals, different rootstocks, clones, profiles, all those different components. And I think for us, like if you just wear your winemaking cap, I think you'd want to make every varietal under the sun, fermented in any vessel possible, and just explore what it can show and how you can kind of coax out those components. I think you have to temper that a little bit with the realities of running a business, the realities of not, just bombarding all of our wholesale partners with 75 different SKUs in every category. So there's that sort of push and pull aspect to curiosity. So for us, we've definitely planted different rootstocks and different clones on the property. Our estate, 45 acres, is all volcanic soil. So I mitigate some of those aspects with different rootstocks like 10114 or 3309. I think in terms of the clonal combinations that we have, Dave Lett and David Adelsheim was key in bringing in the Dijon clones of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay into the US back in the early 90s. And we planted those throughout the Willamette too. So those aspects of having vineyard selection and then planting are somewhat fixed. You can always rip out plants and replant, of course, but the other components like your leaf removal, how much shading you want to leave, your crop levels, those are all things you can do that I change block to block, year to year, given the given growing season. And a lot of that you're obviously forecasting to the end of the year, but when bud break is, when bloom is, and you can pretty much set your watch 90 days from bloom to picking. And I think, being able to, or 100 days actually, but being able to monitor those things and being flexible in your block approach and your season approach allows you to, I think, mitigate a given season that might be warmer than the previous one. And then other years that, a little bit cooler, say 97, maybe 2010, where we'll drop more fruit. I'll open up the canopy on both sides, 100% east and west, and allow more sunlight and, sort of encourage ripening. So there's different things you can be malleable about year to year, which we try to be attentive to and maybe, pivot around.
Yeah. Well, certainly from my viewpoint, I have always been terrified at the idea of winemaking, and now I dabble in Walla Walla, and it was that I think the part that terrified me was that malleability of the decision making process. That the breakthrough for me was kind of realizing, look, you come in with a game plan, but then you have to have enough experience and enough experienced people around you to know how to now start improvising, because your game plan no longer applies to what you're dealing with. Well, anyway, I wanted to encourage everybody to move on to the Puis say. This information that I put up about it is I think sufficient to your needs, and for me, putting it after the Franklin Tay, which I love Margaret River. I think Margaret River is a key area to think about as we find coastal places in the New World that maybe were overlooked or were believed only to be appropriate to certain grapes, that we're finding that their style is changing, and that needless to say, we can enjoy more grapes and more expressions from those areas than before. But as well, I wanted to focus on this slide only long enough to throw the question back to Alex and Jesse, which is the well-known term le raisonner is described here, which is basically a reasoned approach to viticulture, but also a term that doesn't necessarily mean anything, in so much as you can pretty much make up what you think is a reasonable approach. I know I'm exaggerating, but I wanted to bring that to bear in this question, in so much as how much of our discussion around biodynamic or organic or sustainable or live or any of that, how much of that is driven right now by climate change, or maybe I should say, how much will we have to start looking at these tactics, these strategies, in order to deal with climate change? Jesse, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I mean, we have a responsibility as generational wine growers to lead the charge for responsible farming, and be that biodynamic, certified, sustainable, or organic, or I put them under the umbrella of responsible farming, and we can parse it pretty thin about which one you're under. My company and our vineyards are all live certified, sustainable, and salmon safe. That's one we chose to be on and included in. But really, I think it's about making sure that we like I said, lead the charge for responsible farming and agriculture. I mean, viticulture has long been considered to be kind of that canary in the coal mine for climate change, and I think trying to express terroir and varietal correctness and regional correctness is something that we take very seriously as generational wine growers, and expressing that appropriately. So, maintaining that for the next generation. I'm always sort of, reminded of that, Native American proverb that says, you don't own the land, you're just borrowing it from your children. And for me, that's really strikes home. I have a 4-year-old daughter, a 9-month-old son. And I think for me, that aspect of just passing the land, the water and the land along, and the soil along to the next generation and generations, ahead, is really critical. And, if we're able to do that and do that sustainably, profitably too, because family businesses need to stay profitable to stay family businesses. And if we're able to do all those things appropriately, I think the future is bright for sustainability in agriculture. And I think you're seeing a movement towards that on the whole. And that those sort of tectonic shifts, I think, are critical. And, my family grew row crops in the Midwest. So farming is somewhat in our blood. And obviously now being in the great Northwest, we're really blessed with, wonderful, lush forests and just environments to be a part of. Our water's really clean. But that's a responsibility instead of something to be taken advantage of. And I think those are things that we have to monitor, we have to highlight. And if consumers are able to see that, if we're able to tell the story appropriately, and people are making a change. I mean, consumers are buying more organic products. across all levels of their food, across their wines, their beers. And I think that's exactly the right direction that we need to head. And I think retailers, sommeliers, everybody under the sun, wholesalers, speaking to you, Joe, we need to continue to champion those elements, because when we're able to do that, consumers have the ability to make positive choices and drive everybody that direction, the benefits long term are incalculable. So it's critical for sure.
Well, Alex, as you can, well, I would just say that the problem with, as Jesse well knows, with organic in the U.S. is it doesn't really necessarily apply correctly to viticulture and to winemaking, and it doesn't really have a hard and fast meaning when it comes right down to it. The stories are legend of people doing massive organic agriculture and spreading miles of plastic down everywhere so that they don't have to spray. And then you have all this, you have these other impacts. With biodynamic, you have very specific rules. I mean, there are far more, there's still the flexibility of the place, but to you, Alex, I guess I would ask that question as well. What do you think, what drives your interest in biodynamic, and what drives your customers' interest in what you're doing with biodynamic? Is it climate change, or is there something else in play as well, aside from their own personal health concerns?
I think it's many things. First of all, I mean, when we started in the 80s, we didn't think about the climate change. Our idea why we switched to organic farming at this time was to produce simply a better wine from a sustainable vineyard. For us, as Jesse said, it's a responsibility, and for my father, it was very, very important that the next generation could have the same type of soil, the same quality of soil than he had. So for my father, it was very important to create a stable system in the vineyard. For him, it was important to establish cover crops, biodiversity, a stable system. And here it comes to the link to climate change. We see that especially in summer, we can have really heavy rains. And with more than 30 years of organic and now biodynamic farming, our soils are really, they have a good, how to say that, they're stable, we're not losing the soil because of erosion. And I think that's something that's a big benefit that we get from the organic and biodynamic farming. And of course, the customers that we have, they feel like organic or biodynamic farming is closer to nature, and what they really enjoy is a product that is made with hands. It's authentic, and also brings it's something that can help to save nature or to make the environment better. So people enjoy this benefit, not only the quality, not only the sustainable farming, but also they feel like they can, with every bottle they drink, with every bottle they buy, they can help to save nature. And for me, the biodynamic farming is very important to express the characteristics of our soils, of our terroir. I would say that the most important is to establish cover crop, to establish biodiversity in the vineyard, and by the way, that also helps to fix CO2 in our soils. I think that's the beauty of organic farming. You have so many positive efforts, and in the end, the wines are so much more authentic, and people take notice of that more and more. So, and it gives, in the end, it gives me a good feeling. I mean, the vineyards we're working in, I feel that I do the right thing. My team is happy to work in vineyards. and that are growing. We have a lot of flowers, and I mean, not now, but in spring and summer. It's just a great atmosphere. It's good energy in these vineyards, and I think that's very important. And this feeling, the whole package, I think goes straight into our wines, and that's what our customers really enjoy.
Cool. Well, we should go straight into that wine if we can. So if you haven't poured your the Friedelsheimer Saint Laurent, please do so. We might as well, spend some time on it if you don't mind, Alex. Help us understand this a little bit. But Nancy had a question about if climate change is just this atmospheric phenomenon, or if we can actually point to challenges or even changes that we see in the soils themselves, in the landscape itself, whether it's losing other vegetation or increasing insect pressures and things like that, how climate change manifests at the vine level.
I mean, in the vineyard, we definitely. I mean, it's difficult to answer because there's so many things. Of course, during summer we have this problem with water stress. It can happen in most of the years. So our wines, we need to save water in the vineyard, and we can do this with cover crops. We have to cover the soil somehow, and we have to also adapt a bit with our canopy management. I mean, 20 years ago, when my father was running the winery, we had really high canopies, and now the canopy is smaller. Back in the days we took away leaves in the grape zone to expose the grapes to the sun to get more ripeness and more fruit and more color for the reds. We avoid this today because we have so much sun, so much hours of sun, and the sun is so intense. So there's a problem of sunburned grapes. I think we really have to adapt on the weather we get. It's not predictable.
Yeah, and Jesse, you're in the same boat. Obviously, you talked about altering your canopy management to deal with that. Have you ever had to reconsider a row orientation, or really changing what's happening out in the vineyards themselves?
Row orientation would be a pain in the neck to change midstream right now. We have enough of that going on with all the different patchwork blocks we planted over the years, for sure. But I think those components, yields is critical too. I mean, more often than not, I think I'm dealing with warmer vintages than cooler vintages. And, it always sort of tickles me when people are like, oh, we picked at 29 bricks because it was a hot year. It's like, well, you didn't get to 29 from 23 overnight, no matter what the conditions. So maybe you just picked too late. Maybe that was a you problem, not the year. So I don't know. I think some of those things have to be considered, and having a broad base of fundamentals for wine growing and winemaking is critical. And that game plan that you alluded to earlier, Doug, and that I mean, for me, I think I have balance, texture, and complexity tattooed on the inside of my ear from hearing it over and over and over again. So trying to make wines with balance and complexity is key, and picking on time and your management. I mean, I pick 85 different blocks of fruit every single year in the North Willamette Valley, and almost every single one of those little plots, half acre, acre in size, is farmed separately, monitored separately, picked separately, fermented separately. And for me, that creates that feedback loop from vineyard block to the cellar. I mean, literally watching a growing season and then watching a wine in the cellar is an 18-month process that we get to kind of replay over and over. And for me, that really allows me to try to understand it as best that we can, the terroir of a given block, and then sort of map out a game plan for the viticulture for the following year and the winemaking to match the viticulture in the season. And I think, with those elements, the red we just poured a second ago, it was all stainless steel fermented. That reminded me how using different fermentation vessels can help have a broad palette of winemaking to sort of I think, capture the terroir of your given site, depending on the year. I mean, some years I'll ferment more Chardonnay and stainless in concrete than barrel, and some years it'll be more barrel fermentation. So I think those techniques can mitigate some of those seasonal changes year to year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Alex, certainly this is really lovely Saint Laurent, and I love the texture of the wine for sure. Really comes through. Obviously, the acidity is present, and so do you feel like you're dealing with a different Saint Laurent these days than say maybe 25 years ago? Is it in the case of, let's say, British Fizz that a question was asked about earlier? There's no question that British Fizz sparkling wine from England is twice as good as it was 25 years ago, if not more. And that's just climate change going, hey, let me help. Um, but how has Saint Laurent for you changed over the last years, and how so?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we were talking about the moment where we pick the grapes, and that has definitely changed. I mean, 20 years ago, I remember St. Laurent was picked mid or end of September to get the full ripeness. And now we have to pick by the end of August or beginning of September. So that has really changed. And but another thing has changed too. I mean, in 20 years ago, everybody tried to copy red wines from Spain or south of Italy. You know, when I speak to my father, he was he didn't have the self-confidence to say, you know, we're producing these more or less cool climate red wines. So he tried to copy very rich and full-bodied and high alcohol and oak and all you can imagine. And I must say that this is not what we are able to do here. I think we should go more for elegance and freshness. And here comes the acidity. So for us, the sugar level is no longer that important. It's the taste of the grape, and it's the pH, and it's the acidity level. And of course, with climate change, the time of picking is a bit earlier now. But I think we have more options now. And another thing is that we today we have more red wine, we have more plots of St. Laurent, so we really can choose, and that's another thing. We were talking about varietals earlier, and it was not my intention to say now we have tons of different varietals. We can do everything now. We still focus on a few varietals. But we have them in warmer microclimates. We have them a bit higher up, closer to the forest, and so we still have St. Laurent vineyards that we pick a bit later. We ferment them separately. So I would say we just have more options today to create these wines. And for me, I mean, my wife is a chef, or she used to work as a chef in a restaurant. So we're talking a lot about ingredients and different types, different styles of one wine. We've done that before with our Rieslings. So we have maybe 80, 85 different types of Riesling in our cellar when the harvest is done. And maybe with St. Laurent, maybe not that much, but we still have 8, 9 different tanks or barrels with St. Laurent. Picked a bit earlier, picked a bit later, longer maceration, or we add whole bunches in warmer years. So different types, different styles to create that complexity in the wine. So for us, I must say, climate change has again opened for us more opportunities.
Indeed. And so if it's okay, I think we should move on to Jesse's wine, the Classique Pinot Noir. Hopefully I'm accurate on this, Jesse, that we're looking at both volcanic and sedimentary soils, since you're pulling from these other vineyards as well as the estate stuff. But again, you look at the alcohols, this is well under control. I would view this as a really good number for Pinot Noir. I still remember having a conversation with a California winemaker who I will never reveal his name or his winery. And I told him that I particularly liked a certain wine. And he said, you did. I thought you were a guy who didn't like high alcohols. And I was like, well, the label said 14.9. He said, it was 17.1, just for the record. It was like, oh my God. But you know, this is happening. This is one of the challenges of climate change, is you can ripen them more if you want to. Like you said, Jesse, it's more of a winemaker problem than it is a climate problem, probably. But still, you know, if you're going to get your tannins to ripen, you try to push it a little bit, and at least try to feel like you're not leaving greenness inside those berries.
Sure. I mean, stylistically, you know, like I said, you have to have that philosophy and those fundamentals. So probably the same California winemaker who told me after a warm vintage, like, I got this. We'll just add water and acid back. It's cool. I'm like, wow, we picked our vineyard a week ago. Neighbor's yours. That's strange. But yeah, it's like, you know, those things those decisions that you make on, you know, the culmination of a whole growing season are your picking decisions. I mean, you don't get that one back as a winemaker. And I think we get too much credit with the term winemaker, and I appreciate Alex and all those out there that they grow grapes too. It's like, you know, the biggest decisions you make as a winemaker have nothing to do with your winery. You know, it's like, which vineyards do you farm or source? And then when do you pick them? Those are the two critical ones, you know, and that all happens outside of the cellar door. So, you know, winemaking, I think, gets way too much credit as opposed to wine growing. And I'm becoming a little bit more affectionate towards the term wine grower rather than winemaker. And I think, you know, Alex certainly embodies that too. So in terms of our classic Pinot Noir, most of those numbers are right. We pick all 85 blocks, or like I mentioned, just, you know, hand picked, hand sorted, hand punched down 1 to 3 times daily, and 1.5 ton fermenter. So really small open top fermenter. So we keep all those different blocks very segregated and separate. They're hand bucketed out, which is insane, but we're able to keep all the free run juice separate, settled overnight, and then they go to French oak, what I call responsible use of French oak. So they all go to 228 liter barrels, 60 gallon barrels, and then you know, we start monitoring those wines through the whole process through 12 months. So the 2019 is you know, fairly warm year, not hot. And then we picked most of our grapes in a mass span of about 14 days. Again, all those blocks are fermented separately, picked all separately. But I think in general, the vintage shows some cooler climate kind of focus. I like the brightness in the wine. It's not a heavy tannic wine at all, much unlike the 2018s that preceded it. The 2018 wines are kind of big and boxy and more rustic and just more blue-black fruit profile. I think this wine, the 2019s, are a little bit more bright red fruit, kind of that more kind of raspberry, strawberry range, floral components, and that beautiful bright acidity. Although the pH on those wines is fairly high, I think 3.7 for that classy. So it has a lot of richness, but it doesn't have a lot of heaviness per se. So it reminds me a lot of what I would consider really, you know, traditional Willamette Valley Pinot Noir.
Yeah, coming on the heels, you know, tasting it right after Alex's St. Laurent is, you know, it could have been that it would have seemed sort of heavy and glycerol, and the difference in acidity and pH might have been highlighted, but instead, as you say, what shows here is that freshness and those bright, you know, those kind of bright fruits as opposed to those dark fruits. I do recall 2019 having a bunch of mildew pressures as well, though. There's a lot of challenges in the vineyard. I mean, is that something that you feel like, well, God knows, you know, let's hope we don't experience 2020 again, but in so many ways. But do you feel like, you know, those sorts of pressures that you saw in 2019 are going to come back, or do you think those were the rarity, and you know, a warmer, drier year is more we're likely to see?
Undoubtedly, it'll come back. I mean, wine's like fashion; everything comes back eventually, for better or for worse, you know. And definitely, it'll come back. I think it was a little tricky in terms of your picking decisions. I think vineyard management and viticulture was critical. You know, I always say put yourself in a position to be successful, and then make fine tunes after that. But 2019, our picking was pretty top notch. I really liked our viticulture. We had lower yields across the board, and our vineyard teams did a great job of making sure we went and got the grapes when we had an opportunity to get them and when they were ripe. I mean, you know, I love it how, you know, winemakers that are pretty highfalutin can talk your ear off about adjectives, but they can't pick 15 tons of grapes when they need to pick 15 tons of grapes, you know, because doing that hypothetically is not the same thing as doing that in the vineyard. So those logistical preparations and fortitude, I think, really make a huge difference when you're actually making winemaking decisions. And it takes a team of people to do that. I mean, no way that Alex or any winemaker really does it all by themselves. And, you know, we're really, you know, I think, beholden to our teams, their abilities and their experiences to make it happen. And, you know, much like 2020 for everybody in the crowd, it's like your perseverance and fortitude is just huge. And resilience, you know, all those things remind me what it takes to be a winemaker in the fall. And when it's go time, you know, it's an entire growing season rests on a 3-week period, and you either rise to the occasion or you don't. And you know, I'm always reminded of that human factor when it comes to vintage, and it's something that I grew up with, and I look forward to every year. It's like that drumbeat in July gets a little louder in August, and when we hit September, you can kind of feel the buzz in the valley here, and everybody's game. So it's a fun time. But that human element in terroir is a big one, and you know, comes to bear every vintage.
Cool. Well, let's make sure that everybody gets to our last wine, the Group Constantia Shiraz, and I assume most people haven't had the opportunity to go and visit this estate, but you must. I mean, you know, look at the heritage and the history of this place. It's just that I think South Africa is one of the most fascinating places on the planet, and the wines are not the least of it by any means. But having said that, I think that we certainly can continue to talk about some of these challenges and changes, and I'll bring it up to say that it's ironic to me in that you know, we really saw over the last 20 years this movement towards, as Alex alluded to, bigger wines. Let's all make wines in the same style, regardless of where we are. And the last 10 years have been a movement towards, oh hell no, why are we doing that? And I still think that the loudest wine wins so often in many of these situations. But I think that a younger generation is fed up with that and really doesn't give a damn about any of that. And they're charmed by, you know, the acidity in both your wines. And I certainly am. I you know, feel like my palate is my palate. It can't change with style per se, because my palate's going to tell me what my body likes. But I'm grateful because I have so many more choices, and everybody that I talk to seems to, I mean, people constantly use the term freshness. I appreciate that, although I think the three of us could all agree there's a lot of people who talk it and don't have any, you know, they're, as you said, Jesse, they still pick at 29 and then they just add a bunch of water and acid and go, yeah, my wines are fresh too, as opposed to pick it when your acids are still intact, for God's sakes, and the sugars aren't out the wazoo. So I think in some ways the time has come for these kinds of wines. I mean, Alex, your Saint Laurent to me is the kind of wine that I can imagine successfully showing it to people, because all I have to say is, do you see how that makes your food sort of brighten up as well? And that seems to have more merit today than it did before. And partly I would call that the age of my consumer. When I'm talking to an older consumer, it doesn't interest them as much as younger consumers. Do you have a feeling about that at all? Do you see that you can separate the people who buy your wine and love your wine based on what style they like and based on what age they are?
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that in my area we can't make wines with 14, 15 degrees alcohol, and that's just not our style. And I mean, the problem is that quality for a long time was I don't know, was connected with how many Parker points you get, things like that. You know, high points means in a tasting you need to have a really concentrated wines, and then you got high points. High alcohol means more quality, etc. I think that today the consumers have more information, they have more access to information, Thank God, wine is cool. You know, wine is really a lifestyle. It's sexy, and people are interested. People are excited. It's I mean, in normal times we have the tasting room is open here, except Sunday, and people can come and taste. And we're here. We talk with them, and we taste wines together. I think that the younger generation just enjoys this style. They like to drink the whole bottle, and they want to understand how it's produced, and I think fruit, acidity, low alcohol levels, that's something that people really enjoy. And I must say, 10 years ago, when I started to export our wines, I was actually running into open doors. The thing is, when you come from Germany, people have the perception that, okay, you have sweet wines in your bag, you know, and that's it. But being like a new generation, you know, a young guy with a cool hat, and I had other wines, a different story, you know, and then people tasted the wines and they were like, wow, that's cool. I just like it, you know, no matter where it comes from. So step by step, we build up our self-confidence, and we're proud of our style today. Again, my father, he had a bit of problem. He wanted to produce these really high concentrated wines, and we had tons of discussions about that. And I was always saying, you know, I respect you, but I don't like that your style. We have to aim for something else, you know. I was really lucky because I was always interested in wine, and I tasted a lot of wines from all over, and so you get a feeling for what is really appealing. And again, for me, acidity, freshness, lower alcohol level, but good concentration, ripeness. That combination, I think we're able to deliver exactly that. We have a cool story, and that makes that is exciting for the people.
And Jesse, you virtually grew up in a tasting room. I mean, you know, I mean, you really did. And so,
Yeah.
So how have you seen consumers change?
Yeah, I think to Alex's point, you know, people just drinking scores, I think those days are finally more or less behind us. You know, and people looking for complexity in wines, and tiered, you know, complexity in wines, and, you know, wines that are interesting. And, you know, I don't have to love every wine that we drink, or but I think being fascinated by a wine and the complexity of wine is really critical. And for me, the great wines of the world always have a degree of tension to them, you know, that yin and yang, where they have richness, but they have levity, you know, they have complexity, but they have power, they have texture, and all these different components. You know, for me, the wines that keep me most engaged are the wines that have the most interest and complexity. And I think the acid profile definitely drives that. And that's really where you just can't add a bag of tartaric acid and water back to get that, you know. And it's what my folks, Don and Wendy, always say about that length on the palate and the finish and the persistence of a wine, you know, where the acids and the tannins really mold together with the flavors to carry a wine that lasts past your last sip. For me, it's always that tension that I'm looking for in a wine, where it's not this or that, you know, it's not just big and it's not just light. It has components of both. And I think, you know, from our farming to the winemaking and the blending process, that's sort of a North Star for me and my wine team. You know, when we're putting together and crafting the wines, and really looking to make wines with vibrancy and energy, you know. And I love how Alex talks about how the vineyards are, you know, there's a good vibe in the vineyards. And I really like that, because, you know, wine should have that same energy too. And that really is a byproduct of a beautiful panoply of acids on the palate that are, you know, can be high acidity wines, but still balanced acidity. And it's that dynamic for me that really is that life force for any wine. And I think younger consumers are gravitating that direction and away from those over extracted, over, you know, oak dominated, you know, rich, deeper, darker, bolder, style wines. And it's really nice to see, because I've always felt like as consumers and American consumers specifically move that direction, that can only be good for Pinot Noir and only good for the Willamette Valley, and likewise, like-minded wineries and vineyards across the globe.
I think so too. Well, we have gone through our wines, and I did want to make sure that we answered any questions that people had. There have been a number of questions about the positive and the negative impacts of climate change. But I guess I would just ask, what we have no idea what 21 is going to hold, although we're just saying, please don't be 20. Okay, just don't be 20 and we'll be good. But what are you most concerned about going forward in 2021, Alex, in terms of what the climate may be throwing at you? Are there specific worries that you have, or specific concerns that I mean, you've dealt with floods, you've dealt with in the past with hail, all sorts of things you shouldn't have to deal with, but mostly it's been blue sky. So are you worried about it getting too warm at some point?
No, sorry to make that joke, but I think my problem is in March or April, it's frost.
I'm a problem. Everyone knows it. Okay.
No, but I think what we're facing a vegetation period that starts earlier now. Normally it would start mid or end of April, but now it starts beginning of April. So it's 2 more weeks. Where we have is it called bud break? So when
bud break, yeah.
And so we can get really cold nights in April, and that can destroy, especially vineyards that are a bit deeper. That can really destroy the vineyards. We have that we had that in 11, and we had this in 17. Not on the whole estate, but we lost 20-30% of the production, and I hate it, because that's just right in the beginning of the season. It's just it's not a good start, but apart from that, I mean, I remember 16, which was a very, very wet year here in Germany. It started to rain basically in May. And people were saying, okay, at one point it has to stop to rain, and then it will snow, because it was constantly raining, and that was really difficult for us with the plant protection, and also with picking. We had to deal with botrytis, etc. And again, we lost. I think it was 30-35% of our production because we had to select a lot. So I hope 21 is not a difficult vintage for us. I hope we get later in the wines a complex vintage, but I hope it's not that difficult. And I must say 20, with all the things we had, the vintage 20, it has been awesome. I mean, nature was really good to us in 20 when it comes to wine and vineyard. So I was really happy about 20 when in terms of vineyard and wine.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Jesse, Alex referenced 2011. I kind of doubt you don't think we're going to see another 2011 anytime soon, are we?
Yeah.
I love the 2011s, but I also know that I'm out on a limb on my own on that one. I mean, there's some of us who love them, but I think it was like a godsend. I think there's special stuff that you guys made in 2011.
They're drinking great. I had a Adelsheim Elizabeth Reserve 2011 a couple weeks ago, and I texted David Adelsheim and Lizzie Adelsheim, his daughter. I was like, this wine is fantastic. And I never thought we'd say the words picking, Willamette Valley, and November in the same sentence. And 2011 was the first time we had done that. It was definitely the most intense vintage I'd ever been a part of. Physically, emotionally, mentally, I couldn't do it again. I'm just too damn old. But it was one for the ages, to be sure. Latest growing season on record, and we picked Pinot Noir. I think our last pick was November 3rd. So, but great wines can be made in those years if you have the persistence and the fortitude to pull it off. And I think, if anything, farmers are a tough bunch across the board, and that sets the table for for what you can do.
Well, I think, we've spent a little more than the time we were allotted. So if there's no other questions, I might turn it back to Joe to see if there's anything, Joe, you think we should cover that we have not covered?
You guys have covered spectacularly. A couple of the questions that I think I had just to kind of pop through. Jesse, you had mentioned, and I love this. I grew up old world fan. I'm always, I'm blessed with the fact that my dad has a great cellar on aged wines and stuck stuff in the cellar more often than not. And tasting wines from the 50s and 60s out of Bordeaux, even in California, I mean, they were making killer wines. I pulled a bottle of a wine that should be behind bars that was from the late 90s. No, I'm sorry, the late, I think it was 2012. And the wine was dead. I mean, it was so big, juicy, made with high alcohol, and they're just not lasting. And, I think that one of the things that you had said is you get to pick that time as a grape grower or as a viticulturalist. You get to pick when you want to pull the grapes off. 23% sugar seems to be coming a lot faster with global warming. And then you have to deal as the grape mature enough to pick, to be able to have that develop, as Doug mentioned, not having those green seeds, the unripe tannins, things like that. That balance, I think, is the key to hit. And is global warming forcing that balance to be a little bit higher? Or do you think we're still in a range, especially in Willamette, that most vintages that we can nail that within good alcohols and good fruit, that the wine will have that acidity naturally to age?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, but yes, I think, the Willamette we have the good fortune of having a huge mitigating factor for climate change, and that's the Pacific Ocean, 25 miles away, which really, I think Dr. Greg Jones out here at Linfield University has done a lot of studies with wine and viticulture and climate change, maybe one of the lead people on the planet. And Dr. Jones thinks the Willamette is going to, I think, be mitigated for climate change in a way that maybe is more moderated than a lot of other growing regions, which I think is good. Obviously for us, we'll be able to still hang our hat on Pinot Noir 25 years from now, which is, what we want to do. But, those tweaks that you make for elevation and planting, I mean, I think, in the 70s or the early 80s, when we planted a vineyard at 800 foot, that would be considered really, really high. You'd be super crazy to even consider that. Now 850, 900, 950, depending on the slope and the aspect and the soils and, where you are in the valley specifically for your mesoclimate. Those are things you can definitely consider and do really, really well, not just for sparkling or rosé still, but, for production and world-class single vineyard Pinot Noir. So I think as we move up the hillsides, maybe a little bit more to the North Willamette Valley too, as we get past Gaston and we head up towards Washington State and the Columbia Gorge, there's a lot of opportunities for vineyard sites that have, a generation ago would have just been completely off the table. So I do think we're teed up really well, and I think our wines continue to show that, year after year. So.
Awesome. Well, I have to tell you, to have the three of you guys on here is just a true blessing. Three fantastic people. If I had half of the knowledge you guys lost, I would be one of the smarter wine guys in the industry for sure. But thank you all for joining. And if anybody has any questions and wants to stick on, please feel free to stay. I know, Doug, you've got an appointment you got to run off to. I loved your term. You have to jet. Don't we all wish we had to jet?
Yeah, it's not really a jet.
But thank you, Doug, very much for coming and joining us and hosting today. It's been great.
So much fun to talk to you, and of course to talk to Jesse and Alex. This is really great. Thank you guys for
making
great wines.
One quick plug that you are entering, as you kind of mentioned, Echoland is it just came out with your first vintage out of Walla Walla this year.
Yeah, 2018 Syrah, and then a Seven Hills a Bordeaux blend. And yeah, Jesse, I have to say, there's no small amount of pride that I've been mocked and ridiculed by some of my neighbors because we drop our bins too early. They're like, what are you doing? It's not even 24. It's like, that's right. It's not even 24. And that's how I like my Syrah. It's like, and that's one of those where I'm like, you think you're insulting me? You're making me feel better about my decisions right now.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
looking
fight's a
forward
good
to
fight,
tasting
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Looking forward to tasting those, Doug, and congratulations on yet another boundary that you're breaking.
Thank you so much, Joe. I look forward to working together.
Absolutely. And if anybody has any other questions, I think Doug's going to jump off. If there is anything else, you can throw that in the chat. One thing I was going to throw into Alex to ask, thanks, Doug, was to ask you is that I remember growing up and loving Rieslings and some of those early 70s Rieslings and just, having those on and off years and just, thinking, oh my God, this vintage is phenomenal for this wine and this, if you're going to get nice wine, that's it. But don't go to the, QBAs, don't hit those, the cabinets, or they didn't even make a cabinet that year. I think it was 2003. Everyone's like, okay, enough with the good vintages of Riesling. And it's like, everything has been spectacular for so long with so many fewer off vintages. I would imagine that a lot of that is obviously global warming. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, 2003 was an amazing vintage, and that was the time when everybody still thought that okay, the higher alcohol, the better, the more ripen, the more maturity in the wines, the better. We had for our basic wines, you could buy wines here with 14 degrees alcohol, a dry Riesling, no acidity left. I mean, that was really something completely new for us, and I think we have all learned from 2003. I must say, I mean, that was the first real warm and dry vintage that we have experienced. It was really intense. And after that, we had cooler vintages. But we have seen that since 2006, 2007, 8 was slightly colder, but then 9 warmer vintages, and so I think we really had to adapt on these vintages, and I think we have understood that today. Elegance, freshness, acidity. Again, this is the key. This is what we can do, and I think the good winemakers in our area really have changed the mindset, and try now to really adapt on these vintages to keep that style that we're able to do here in our cool climate.
Absolutely. The funny thing is that we always end up doing this, but we're preaching to the choir. I mean, you guys are both very old world style, keeping it modern, but keeping those alcohols levels low, the fruit balanced, acidity natural. So, I mean, we are all definitely loving all that you guys are making. So thanks for that. Anything else from anybody as far as any other questions before we let these fabulous guys back to, well, Alex is going to keep drinking, being the start of the evening for him, and Jesse's got a lot of work to do.
I got 2 kids to go chase, so yeah.
But if there's not any other questions, a lot of accolades coming over. Everybody's saying thank you so much, so great. And if anybody has any questions that we're not answering here or that you haven't had a chance to ask, and please, any customers, anybody you want to unmute, go ahead, feel free. But to ask that question, but we will be sending out an email with everybody's emails attached, so you can always ask questions later that you forgot to ask. Also, we'll have all the information on the wines and links to the websites, as well as, of course, the link to this recording. Any questions out there? I see Lewis, you've got a question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think honestly, in regards to when is it going to come, cost effective? I think it's cost effective now, and how is it not cost effective? And I think we need to be prioritizing that question Because if things aren't sustainable, what's the end game for non-sustainability? It's, you know, I ain't like Jeff Bezos. I ain't going to Mars. You know, my kids aren't. We don't have that kind of wealth. You know, the you know, galaxies across the way. We got one planet here, and we have to make certain that we farm and treat our planet like it's going to be here for generations to come. I mean, that's frankly the bottom line. And to do farming without sustainability is a dereliction of duty, period. So I think it's possible now, but we need to encourage it in terms of as our consumers, wine buyers, and for all types of agriculture too. It's that stark, and the challenges are that real, and they need to be met now.
Great question, Louis, and totally agreed, Chassis. And Alex, I think that's you're preaching to the choir there to you as well, as far as your thoughts there about the sustainability. Lewis's question was, do you anticipate a time when it will be more cost effective for organizations to operate sustainability? Is this only possible with the government intervention, or will businesses do this on their own?
No, I think businesses will do this on their own. I mean, I can speak for myself. Of course, it has to be sustainable, and I think that this is very important. Like quality, sustainability. We have to look really at the long term, and it's that's super important. And